Nervous about teaching writing? Maybe that's why you clicked on this video. We all want to make sure that we're not teaching our kids the wrong way, but today I'm so excited for you to meet Katie Glennon. You're going to hear from this homeschool veteran and writing expert. Today we're chatting about all things typical and atypical writing, curriculum choices, ways to extend, potential interventions, and then when to switch courses if something doesn't feel like it's working. Katie, I'm so grateful to get to chat with you today. Would you mind starting off? Where you're coming to the table from? Tell me about an experience that you had perhaps as a kid and that kind of informed how you felt about writing. And maybe has that informed how you teach writing now?
Okay. Well, as a kid, I loved telling stories verbally, and then I would love to write stories just on my own. And they were mostly retelling things that might have happened during the day, but kind of putting my own spin and imagination on it. And then I went into creative writing and making up stories. And whenever I was in school, nobody told you how to do it.
Mhm.
So when they asked me to write a paper about something else, I found that a challenge
Yeah.
because it wasn't using my own imagination or my own know-how of how I learned to do it on my own. And funny enough, when I was in college, this went all through high school. They never really taught you how to do a paper, you know.
Wow.
And when I was in college, I studied English as well as education. And even then, nobody taught me how to teach children how to write. And I thought that was amazing.
Yeah.
And they went over methodology of education and how the brain works and the best way to teach and learning methods and so forth. And then for English, it was all literature based.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I've just graduated. I need to teach all these children how to write. How am I going to do it?
Yeah.
So there was a lot of trial and error and a lot of research of all sorts of sources, and with a lot of different types of classroom situations, tutoring, homeschool co-ops, online teaching, even acting as an educational consultant in
Mhm.
schools in the Southeast in the United States. I came up with my own methodology through the feedback of the students and how well they responded and how well they did and how they improved from their first writing assignment, which I kept at the beginning of the
Mhm.
year. I did this with my own kids till their last writing assignment at the end of the school year. And I showed them so that I gave it back to them at the end of the school year and they could see and compare how well they improved from the beginning of the school year till the end. So to me, that was exciting. And
That's
to
huge.
see them be so happy and relieved with the obvious improvement that they've made, I mean, that made my year every
Yeah.
year. So, and the
Oh,
same
that's
thing with my
beautiful.
kids. So I had a natural writer in my homeschool for
Mhm.
my oldest and my youngest. He had some language skill issues, starting out with 98% profound speech impediment and showing signs of dyslexia. And so we worked through that, and I can get through that as well. So I've
Mhm.
kind of worked on both ends of the extremes, a
Yeah.
natural writer and then one that really had some issues. So,
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, and you've gone through, like you said, that more typical route,
mhm,
or perhaps on the, excelling end of the scale, and
mhm,
that less typical route. For those who perhaps didn't attend education school, and
mhm,
perhaps were not teachers before they started homeschooling,
mhm,
let's kind of walk through, and I'll
mhm,
kind of chip in my experience here too, because
mhm,
typical writing and learning to write, there's kind of a trajectory that we might follow.
mhm,
That'll definitely diverge for certain kiddos. But, let's start at the beginning with a typical writer. So things
mhm,
like pencil grip, drawing,
mhm,
coloring, fine
mhm,
motor skills. This
mhm,
is 2, 3, 4, 5 years
mhm,
old as well. What have you seen or any of your experiences perhaps with kind of teaching those skills and maybe
mhm,
guiding them in those skills?
mhm. Well, can I back up just one step before
Yeah.
that? I'm a big proponent of reading to your children every day for at least 15 minutes. 30 minutes is great, more is great. And when you start off with their reading, and this is really great for their language skill development and it does come out in their writing. Looking for rhyme, rhythm, and repetition in the books that you read to them. And while you read to them, point to the words and the letters while you're making the sounds. Talk to them about what's happening in the story with the pictures, asking them questions, and that will help them start off on the right foot, recognizing that these little squiggly lines on paper are letters. When you put those letters together, they make sounds and words. And then when you put the words together, they make sentences.
As we read to our kids every day, I'm thinking I'm in the thick of this with my youngest, right? She's literally just starting to read like these last 2 weeks. It's really fun. And as we're choosing books, we're doing books like, Brown Bear, Brown Bear, Brown Bear. What do you see? And I remember a friend came over and she picked up our copy and started reading it to her kid. And we all read different ways, but she sang the book. Brown bear, what do you see?
Yes.
I see a red bird looking at me. And I was like, hey, hold on. Cool. Perfect. And so any little rhyme, rhythm, kind of repetition, all those little patterns that we can pick up on and connect back to. I always like to think of neurons as little highways and roads, right? Any other lane that we can add to that highway to make it even broader is going to make that skill even more strong. And so if we can sing the book, if we can make up a story about being two sisters that go when they get to play together, that's a story that's going to stick with them. And, my 11-year-old will still do that every once in a while. I'm like, do you remember that? But it sticks with them. So I love seeing that. So exactly. Daily reading. Any tips for people to get that done? Because I'm already hearing the comments, oh, but we don't have time.
Well,
what would you say to that? We could give some tough love too.
Part of our evening routine was always dinner, bath, and a bedtime story. That was just every single night. And when my kids got used to it and I got used to it, the dirty dishes sat in the sink. They didn't get done until the kids got in bed. The kids were in bed usually between 7:30, 8 o'clock. If the mom was tired, it was 7 o'clock. And then I got a chance to do the dishes in the sink. But they sat there. The kitchen sat there waiting until we finished dinner, had our bath, and then we had our story time, and then bed.
So build it into the routine and figure out what the priorities are. If the dishes need to stay there for a little while longer, then they might need to. Okay, I appreciate that.
And this is coming from a mom whose husband traveled all the time. So I was doing it on my own. Yeah. But that routine, I hung on to it and it helped me. And the kids got used to it and they expected it.
Yeah, that's huge. And I'm willing to bet that continued on, that little nighttime reading continued on through elementary, middle, and high school. Would you say they were bedtime readers?
Oh, yeah. Definitely. And then when they became more independent, where they could just sit there and look at a book, even if it was the pictures, we did audio tape. Back then it was audio tapes. We didn't really have the CDs yet until they got older, but it was the audio tapes and a book that they could follow along. Or there was a quiet time every day right after lunch for at least 30 to 45 minutes of quiet time. And so that was quiet time for me too, for a break in the middle of the day.
Yeah. Awesome. Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay. All right. Let's move forward a little bit into that kind of preschool and kinder kind of skill area. So we're thinking pencil grip, drawing, coloring, fine motor skills. I have my little tricks, my little bag of tricks. What did you use? What were your tricks?
Well, as I said, I had one that was more of a natural writer, but his fine motor skills needed work, and especially with a pencil grip. And I found that those cylinder type pencil grips that you put, they were useless for my kids. What I recommend is more the triangular shape that have the indentations where your fingers and your knuckles are put into the correct position. And so we used those. And that really helped them tremendously with the pencil grip. Then as far as my other one who really needed some more help with the fine motor skills, we did anything that you can do with pincers and doing the plastic large forceps or large plastic tweezers in picking up anything from beans to little beads, and you can even include math skills by sorting colors and size and anything to incorporate other, skills. I always tried to include those. Putting big fat beads onto a string or a yarn. That was a big one. Working with Play-Doh is a big one because you're really working those muscles. Little play scissors and cutting the Play-Doh is really good.
Yeah.
Anytime you see in some sort of workbook, some sort of zigzag lines or loop-de-loops or squigglies, and taking a fat pencil or a thin pencil with the pencil grip and having them do that tracing is a huge thing too, as well as taking the scissors and cutting on those lines. So we had, I don't even know if they're available nowadays, but we had Shrinky Dinks
Oh,
where,
yes.
yeah, where the way you start off was they had tiny little pegs in the
Mhm.
shape of whatever you were making, and then the tiny little beads that you
Yeah.
would place on those tiny little pegs, and then you would put them in the oven, and they'd melt
Yeah.
and shrink. Right.
We have
Well,
perler beads and you just use an iron on top. Yeah,
oh, okay.
exactly.
So
Uh-huh.
just even something like making something like that. My younger son loved it. He was actually creating an art project by taking these tiny little beads and practicing his fine motor skills. With the tiny little beads and the shrinky dinks.
Yeah. That's
So
awesome.
anything
I
like
love
that
it.
was great. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll add a
And
few more.
mhm,
We have a cake pan filled with dry rice. Use their finger, use a chopstick, use a paintbrush or the eraser end of a pencil for them to do their spelling words. And they love the shake to erase whatever they drew.
okay.
We've got a full wall that we painted black, and that's our chalkboard. And so we'll start usually with their name. We'll write their name in chalk, and then we'll use either just the pom pom itself dunked in water, or with a clothespin on the pom pom. That gets a little fiddly because sometimes the clothespin comes off or twists apart. So they'll trace and erase their name with water, and then one more. What was the other one? I'm gonna forget. But anyway, we love perler beads too. So those are
Mhm.
all great. I love it. Did I cut you off? Was there one more that was coming?
No, no,
No?
you're
Okay.
just you're reminding me of other things that we did with just paintbrushes and holding the paintbrushes and making letters. We did water out in our
Mhm.
driveway. We took a small paintbrush and we would write letters out on the driveway, and they would evaporate, obviously.
I
But
love it. Oh,
so
so
yeah.
fun. Okay, cool. So that's around pre-K, early
Mhm,
kinder. We're moving into kinder to first, and we're kind of
mhm,
chunking these. If you're following along, we're kind of chunking these ages. These are
mhm,
typical ages. So if you are watching your child and you're thinking this is different for us, that's fine. We're gonna get to that in just a second. So hang tight,
mhm,
but just hear us out for just a second. So with K-1, we're looking at getting a little before first grade, right? We hopefully have letters, upper and lowercase. We've got starting the concept of words, these groupings of letters, perhaps sentences, perhaps the conventions of a sentence with capitalization, with punctuation, that sort of thing. Any
mhm.
favorite ways of teaching those types of skills?
Well, I tended to do it in a more natural, incorporating it into our lives. My kids would help me write the shopping list with whatever items we needed. We would write cards to our grandparents or for dad for Father's Day or his birthday. We'd make signs. So that all incorporated, and a lot of times it was creative spelling at the beginning. And we didn't
Mhm.
get all uptight about creative spelling as long as they were trying to sound. And again, remember, my younger son, he was 98% profound. So connecting the letters and the sounds together was very difficult for him. So I'm going to give you a tip about that when we get to that. But they didn't even realize that they were writing words and writing sentences. They didn't think about it as an assignment. And so just writing was something that they would do naturally.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
And
that's
I
what
think
I would
I think
recommend.
that's really important because it's not. a punishment. Writing
Hmm.
is not a punishment. It's not go
Exactly.
write these 5 sentences. Oh, now you're going to write an essay, right? As much as we can to avoid
Hmm.
getting to that point,
Right.
please do. And I think another thing for our family, we're bilingual, and so my husband only speaks Spanish to our kids, and I only speak English, and they're learning French. And so once they start reading in English, we put them in French. And the really cool part, and other bilingual families will see this as well, they'll start to identify those patterns, those phonetic patterns, as well as some of the conventions that differ between
Hmm.
languages. Why
Hmm.
is that question mark upside down in Spanish? Where's that random, accent mark in French coming from? Right. And they'll
Hmm.
start to ask those questions. And it's natural. It's
Hmm.
curiosity. It's why is it there? I want to know why and how to use it. It's not
Hmm.
a on page 6 of your grammar book kind of thing.
Hmm. Right.
So I love it. I love it. We do, I don't know. I think it was a random kind of invention when I started out with our oldest. I was like, hey, you're in first grade, so you're going to write 1 sentence a day. Where did that come from?
Hmm.
I don't know. But that was fine for her. And she was happy about it. And then she would translate herself into Spanish. So
Hmm.
we went to the park today. Fuimos al parque hoy.
Yeah.
And then we're looking at both sets of letters, creative spelling for
Hmm.
sure. And we
Hmm.
just leave it for a little while. We leave it for
Right.
a little while. We encourage that love. We encourage that freedom, and, willingness to write. Because
Right.
later we'll get into a little bit more of
Right.
the corrections, if we want
Right.
to say that, a little bit of
Right.
editing,
Right.
but we don't want to pile it on at first.
Right.
Perfect.
Another thing is if you have someone who loves to color or
Mhm.
someone who loves to draw, have them draw a picture, and then if you have we this was another main a staple in our house was the blank space up on top and then the spaced lines on the
Mhm.
bottom. Draw a picture and then write about the picture, and
Mhm.
that gives them something to write about if they can't think of what they want to write about.
Exactly. Perfect. I'll link below. I have a free workbook you guys are willing to pick up. It's super easy to print. It's got 5 days to start with, but there are larger versions as well. And it's got different things to hopefully keep kids excited about writing. So it's some of those coloring things, but it's also the beginning of a sentence with a cliffhanger. It's this
Mhm.
very intriguing picture and write about it. So some of having those tools on hand are really helpful to kind of encourage that creativity, not only in writing, but also in their artistic abilities and fine motor, getting back to
Yeah.
that. So, all
That's
right,
right.
let's go to second to fifth sentences, perhaps sentences to paragraphs. And
Okay.
remember about
Mhm.
this age, kids are reading to learn and not
Mhm.
learning to read. So if
Mhm.
you guys are thinking about your kiddos and you're thinking, wow, yeah, my fourth grader is writing about random stuff that I don't even remember. I don't even remember teaching that. Well, they probably read it somewhere else and they're bringing
Mhm.
it in. So,
Mhm.
favorite ways of kind of moving into sentences to paragraphs. What do you think?
Well, what I loved to do was try to bring in unit studies, and usually we did unit studies based on a historical time period, and then we did a lot of reading to along with that historical time period, along with the projects and activities and field trips and art projects and crafts and so forth. But if we read something, it was from a book that might have just a page or two of information about that one topic. Then I'd have my kids, and I fully believe in this because you have a lot of cognitive skills happening with this, where they retell what you just read to them. It's in chronological order. They're taking what they remember from here, bringing it forward. They're summarizing, they're recalling details, they're organizing their thoughts, they're assimilating the vocabulary from what you've been reading together. And through that retelling, they're actually remembering it. It's like Velcro, it sticks.
Mhm.
So, not only the cognitive skills, but then you have something to write about.
Mhm.
And again, I want to incorporate that writing in a more natural way. So we would have pages that are referred to as notebooking pages where it has lines. Sometimes it would have a picture already. Sometimes it would have a space on top to draw a picture. But whatever we just read, and it's not every single time we read, but at least 3 times a week,
Mhm.
after we've read about something in our unit study, they would, and it starts out slowly. They need a little practice to retell what we've just read, but then once they can retell it, then I would sit down with the kids at the same time, and I would have them retell to me what they just heard. And for the younger one, again, it was more challenging, but he would tell me something and I would say, "Okay, tell me that sentence again." And then he would. And then I said, "Okay, let's write that on down on paper." So it was one sentence with him at a time, but by the end of the year, that one sentence became several paragraphs. And this was uh, second grade, the end of second grade, third grade. And this is someone with a language skill kind of deficit. My other son, who was in fifth grade, he would be able to go ahead and start with a few sentences and then a paragraph, and then he'd be writing several pages by the end of the year. But because they had the content and they didn't have to use the brain cells to try to come up with what they wanted to say, they had that content. They were able to focus on remembering the order of what they wanted to say and just focus one sentence at a time. And that's what I found the most effective in getting them used to getting ideas on paper.
Perfect. I love that. And you're chunking the task, right? So
Mhm,
we're not saying, okay, child, we've talked about what we've read. Now go off
mhm,
and produce this work.
mhm,
No, we do need to break it down. And we can also, I'll talk all day about executive functions, but the idea of, anticipating the task ahead. If they've
mhm,
done this, for a few months into the school year,
mhm,
they're going to
mhm,
know, okay, this is what is expected of me. But also, they know that you're there and they can expect you to support them there. So that
mhm,
scaffolding is really, really important there. It's huge.
mhm,
I love it.
mhm,
Okay. I also, you said so many good things. Okay. So unit studies, the fact that they are surrounded by multiple sources on the same topic is
mhm,
huge. They're getting probably 3 times the amount of vocab on the
mhm,
same topic.
mhm.
So it's not just maybe stale textbook vocab
Right,
on
right.
a
It's
topic.
told in a story.
Mhm.
Mhm,
Yep. And then I would even say, I'm trying to think of other things to pull in. If you guys have been around this channel a little while, you hear me talk about Nearpod. It's a free tool that people can use in their homeschools or their traditional classrooms. I loved it as a teacher, but I love it even more as a homeschooler because I can then say, hey, here's this topic we've been talking about. Here's this, pre-made lesson, and I can edit and take things out if I want to. But then I can see what they've done in there, and it's already a little bit scaffolded for them. So consider using other tools like that because I know sometimes there's a little bit of friction. Hopefully, you have this warm, buddy elbow relationship, but I know that's not the case for everybody. And so if your kiddo needs a
mhm,
little bit more space, one more way that we've done this, my second child is in her full tween era and she just wants space. Sometimes she'll cuddle. She just wants space for writing. She is on one computer at one end of the table and I'm on mine. And we open the
mhm,
same Google Doc. Google Docs is everything when it comes to writing. So she'll write a sentence. I'll say, hey, check this one. I can highlight it. I'm not telling her, I'm not over her shoulder. She doesn't feel, the presence hovering over
mhm,
her. I can say, hey, check this out. Oh, I forgot the apostrophe. Oh, I forgot the period. Oh, we need to capitalize this. There's so much self-editing that happens there.
mhm,
So give the ownership back to the kids whenever possible because we are starting to edit a little bit more here. We're looking for more correct spelling patterns. We're looking
right,
for those conventions to be in place. So
right,
finding other ways to nurture that relationship, but also have
right.
some effective editing methods. All
Well,
right.
what I did with the spelling, if
Uh-huh.
I saw that they were consistently, for instance, missing the apostrophes
Mhm.
with its and contractions
Mhm.
or spelling certain words uh, incorrectly each time, we would actually take those, write them down, and that would be the weekly spelling list so that
Perfect.
they would be able to correct those.
Cool.
But another thing that we used when we were in between unit studies, just for a little extra practice, was workbooks by Evan Moore.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you're familiar with those, but
Yep.
they have some specifically for this grade range for how to build sentences, how to build paragraphs. And I found them effective when it came to trying to help them elaborate their sentences. because it pulls out the idea that you want to use a descriptive word in addition to just your subject and your verb and showing action and putting an article in the front. So it goes through certain forms of grammar in building a sentence and the sentence structure. So
nice. Good. Okay. So you're hearing all these resources. I hope you guys are taking notes. So great workbooks. I would also say for those of us maybe working to stay on a budget, if we're not looking at workbooks, search Dolch words or Fry words. Those can be your first spelling lists. And then move on. As Katie said, your kids can create their own spelling list based on what they got wrong. You don't necessarily need a spelling curriculum. And there are lots of those online that you can access for free too. So use what you've got and have kids work on what they need to work on. They don't need to spell words that they already know how to spell. I think that kind of goes without saying, but a lot of times we get so in the groove of this is what the curriculum asks for, this is what I shall do. Doesn't have to be like that. This is your homeschool. Make it your homeschool.
Yep.
All right. Let's go on to sixth grade plus. So we're looking at different types of writing. This could be author's purpose with author's purpose pie. I know this is kind of a teachery thing, but PIE, right? With my students, I always say, send me the emoji that tells us about author's purpose fast, and the fastest kid gets like a virtual high five or whatever, but we'll send this pie, right? PIE. Persuade, inform, entertain. Those are three ways that the author might kind of put their writing out there. Literary analysis, taking those books that we've read in our unit studies and working through them, talking about what we saw. Narrative writing, just making up stories, telling a story in a sequential manner. But that brings in all sorts of things, dialogue, stuff like that. So the list goes on. Katie, what are your favorite things here?
Well, I guess I would say I specialized in 6 through 12, grade 6 through 12, with writing and language arts. And I would definitely recommend that you really start with expository writing, like you mentioned, as opposed to creative writing, unless your child has that natural bent, because it can be more difficult for someone to learn how to write while you're trying to stress, okay, I want you to make up a story at the same time that they're learning how to write. So I would definitely go with expository. I always start off with an informative essay. And I usually try to follow the 5-paragraph format just to get them started. And I always stress starting with some sort of a brainstorming sheet. And I usually do bubble clusters with like a bubble and then spokes coming from it with little subtopics. So that they can get their idea down on paper. And I always say, pick a topic that you can sit here and talk to me about for 15 to 20 minutes without even taking a breath, and you don't even have to stop and think about it, because that's the topic I want you to write about. And it was usually a hobby or something that they spent a lot of time doing, and they enjoyed writing about it. And so not only were they knowledgeable, but they enjoyed it. So they would have their main topic, then they would pick 3 subtopics that they want to pick and tell about it. And then from that, they would have little other bubbles around those, and it would talk about the details and the examples. And because a lot of times that's what you're digging out of your child. You're really trying to pull those details and examples. Okay, well, what do you want to say about that? Well, if they get it down on this pre-writing or this brainstorming sheet, that is going to help them get all the ideas down on paper. It's starting to help them organize it into the subtopics already, because that is the framework of this 5-paragraph essay. And then you can start off with your introductory paragraph. You have your 3 body paragraphs, and then you have your concluding paragraph. And the introductory and the concluding paragraphs are basically introducing those 3 subtopics in your main topic. The concluding paragraph is then rephrasing or restating those things that you just talked about. So once they get all that down on that paper, they can transfer those ideas into the proper paragraphs. And that's my favorite way of introducing how to get them writing in the expository manner. And then from there, we move on to the different ones that you were talking about, where we delve into the literary analysis, the author's purpose, the entertaining, the compare and contrast. So because those add more elements to that 5-paragraph format.
Sure. Absolutely. I love it. And there are so many extra things that we can kind of add on to this with, part of my online teaching is with kids where we do a public speaking part of this, but they've written an
Mhm,
essay on it beforehand. So they're
mhm,
extracting their public speaking outline from the
mhm,
essay that they wrote.
mhm,
And then I have one kid who would like to start a YouTube channel. So his mom said, "That's fine. I don't care. He still needs to write the essay, but
mhm,
then he's going to write his script, which is
mhm.
essentially a 5 paragraph essay, just in a little bit more of a colloquial kind of, I don't know, more entertaining kind of
Mhm.
manner, getting a little bit
Yes.
of
Yep.
body language involved and stuff. So
Yes.
this is all so interwoven that if
Yes.
you can identify, or if a kid, even better yet, if a kid can identify, hey, I actually really like talking in front of people, or I like teaching them about
Mhm.
Minecraft, I like teaching them about Nintendo, I like teaching them about soccer,
Yep.
go for it. Teach
Yep.
me everything you need to know and everything I'd
Yep.
never really wanted to know, but I'm so excited to hear it from you because you're excited to tell me. And you're going to get so many details that
Mhm.
would be what you're pulling out of them. So
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
love that you brought that up.
Yeah.
And then again, shout out Nearpod here. This is a fantastic tool for some of those deeper grammar points, perhaps adding dialogue to writing. Adding in like a really solid introduction or a really solid conclusion. Sometimes those feel kind of ambiguous to kids, even though we know there's a thesis in there somewhere. We need a hook in that
Mhm.
intro. We need a call to action here at the end. But what is that? I've never experienced that as a 10-year-old. So show me. Some of these other tools can be really helpful there. So those are really fun. Now, we've so far gone down typical lane. Let's go
Mhm.
ahead and pivot over to atypical or non-typical writing lane. What are some of the challenges that maybe you've experienced or
Mhm.
that could come up? And
Yep.
maybe when should we seek out some diagnostics?
Yep. Well, I have personal experience with that. Um, as I said, we we had speech therapy extensively for the speech impediment. When the writing time came, as he was old enough to start writing, we saw a great hesitancy. We also saw he was ambidextrous. We couldn't figure out which hand he was more dominant in to start writing. So we had to figure that out. And we decided to go with the right hand, which I probably shouldn't have done that. Now that I know more, because at that time, we didn't have all the research that we have now. And I encourage you, if you have a child who seems to be ambidextrous and they just don't know which hand they want to use the pencil with, to either, or a crayon or a paintbrush or whatever, he used both simultaneously. Um, you can do, I don't know if you're familiar with the whole right eye or left eye dominant. You can have your child stand across the room, look at a doorknob, hold up their thumb with both eyes open, center the thumb onto the doorknob so that both their eyes are looking at the thumb and the doorknob with it will look like the thumb is touching the doorknob. So that it's centered right on there. Have them close their right eye and see if that thumb is still, don't move. See if that thumb is still centered on the doorknob the way it was before. If it is, they're right eye dominant. If it's not, close the right eye, have them look through their left eye with the thumb still focused on the doorknob. If the thumb is on the doorknob with their left eye open, it means their left eye dominant. If that way, that will give you more of a clue as to what will be more natural for them to write with. And it will help them. It will help them. My son also, and I didn't know this at the time too, when he was a toddler, and I'm kind of going back a little bit for signs, just so that you can kind of look back maybe at your child's history if they seem to be having some issues. My son did the soldier crawl. He didn't crawl on his hands and knees, and so he didn't do the typical cross crawl with the one hand moving with the left knee up and then the left hand moving the right knee up. He was dragging himself like a soldier using his arms. And then I was expecting him to get up and start crawling the normal way, but he got up and started walking. So he skipped the cross crawl. And I remember the pediatrician telling me, get behind him and try to push his little tushy up and get him on his knees. And so that's what I did. I would follow him around and try to push him up on his knees. Of course, I was exhausted by the end of it, and I don't know how effective it was because he did also show a hesitancy in riding a bike. Even when you have training wheels, you still have that little wobble. And he didn't like to ice skate, roller skate, anything that made him unsteady on his feet because his balance was a little bit off. And it was harder for him to tell his right hand from his left hand and his right side from his left side. It was challenging for him to tie his laces. So there were signs there that then when he started writing and it was more difficult for him to hold the pencil and make the lines and then writing things backwards, then I was like, okay, we have some issues here. So I waited till about 7 or 8 because I was still working on some more auditory processing, that kind of thing with him, with his sounds and making sure that he could read first, because that was a challenge. And I recommend a phonics program for early readers. But if you know for sure after getting them tested that they have problems with dyslexia after age 8, if they're still writing transversals other than P and Q or B and D, things that look very similar, then I would say, okay, it's time to try to get them tested with some sort of educational psychologist, um, and see if they can be, pinpointed with definite dyslexia and how much. Now, my child, he was pretty mild compared to students that I've worked with and have seen. So I actually attended a homeschool conference. I attended every workshop by a woman named Diane Kraft. And she has a website, dianecraft.org, that has all kinds of things that if your child is just slightly having a problem, and I wouldn't say do this instead of getting them diagnosed, but if you want to try something, you can go to her website. She has all kinds of articles. She has lots of educational resources. We did a brain integration therapy with my son where we actually put aside the writing, and instead of writing every day, we did 20 minutes of the brain integration therapy where we did exercises that were similar to a cross function, across the midline of the brain. We put a line down the middle of the paper. We did figure eights across the body. So we were communicating to both sides of the body, and we practiced forming letters that way too. So on this side, we did the A. On this side, we did the B. On this side, we did the C. On that side, we did the D. So we were constantly writing letters of the alphabet in the right direction, but we were crossing the body the entire time. And so we went through this for almost a year, but he was able to write the alphabet without the transversals anymore. And it was opening what she calls the writing gates. So that was extremely effective for my son because he was showing mild signs of this. But again, he was able to read. Now, if you have a child that is really having problems reading as well as writing all these different letters backwards. Now, with my son, it was a few, and it went longer than it should have. I would recommend Orton Gillingham or Barton programs because they do work with, especially Orton Gillingham, they have the reading, they have not only the hearing part, the seeing part, the saying part, they have the writing part. So they involve all the different types of learning pathways, and they help dyslexic students.
These are great. Okay, we'll link all these below. So I hope you guys, if you weren't taking quick notes, just scroll down a minute and go check those out. This is really helpful. Okay, I love it. And it, for somebody who's broken a lot of bones and had a lot of surgeries, it sounds like you're talking about physical therapy, but this sounds like physical therapy for opening. I love that image, opening kind of the writing gates, right? There's some cross brain things happening here, and there are some ways to open those doors. We just need the right keys. So this is huge. Okay. I love it. I wonder also, and this is something that we did with being bilingual, I wanted them to have a way to communicate that wasn't verbal. And so I taught them like the ASL sign language. So I would say, oh, that letter is this, that letter is this, A, and then they would have a physical way to do it. So again, adding in as much of those, other lanes on the highway, like we talked about before, so that we can broaden these pathways for the learning to stick better, or just open up the doors in the first place. Very cool. Okay, Katie, we've talked about so much. All right, we've got a few more things. If you guys are still here, you're champions. Hang tight. Okay, we're talking about curriculum. So choosing a curriculum, a writing curriculum. I'm going to go ahead and confess that we don't have a writing curriculum. I've mentioned a lot of what we do. Our kids write a ton. Our 6th grader writes 6 sentences in English and 6 sentences in Spanish every day, plus like her language arts essay work and stuff like that. They're doing a lot of typing, that sort of thing. If that works for you, fantastic. But I know there are others out there who are like, I need something. Give me something. What are you recommending, perhaps for maybe what you used or what you recommend now for those typical and atypical learners?
Well, as I said, I taught my kids with the notebooking pages, starting out like I said, and then I used the method that I have an online self-paced course on how to write a 5-paragraph essay naturally using the steps that I explained to you. And it includes everything from the brainstorming to getting the framework to the introductory paragraph, like you said, with the hook, and then the concluding paragraph with a clincher, and then transition words in between. So you're relating the paragraphs to one another, and also varying the sentence structure. So, and then also how to self-edit and go through that process. So it includes all of that. However, if you don't want to do like the online self-paced class like I've created, there's a very popular program that a lot of people do like. It is expensive, but that's IEW, Institute for Excellence in Writing. And they take a paragraph, it's an expository informative paragraph about some kind of topic. It teaches you how to take keywords out of that topic and then write your own sentences retelling that paragraph with a couple of the keywords. And then you have a notebook full of resources that include prepositions and transition words and so forth. But it has a parental teaching component to it. It has the student component. And one of my sons did try that, the older one, because we belong to a co-op. He actually found it too restrictive because he had to retell this paragraph that he had no interest in. He had to follow different rules, and he just didn't like that. He just didn't find it naturally, natural for him. My younger one, I wouldn't even try it because if my older one was bucking the system with that one, I knew my younger one. So I tend to, as I said, do it more naturally, but it's very similar, loosely similar to the IEW. But a lot of parents, they swear by the IEW if they want a very structured, complete program and they want to go through the training or they find a co-op that offers it. They do enjoy that program.
Cool. Okay. Well, good to know. And you guys, Katie is demonstrating what we should all be doing as homeschoolers. We have the freedom and the ability to choose what each kid needs. That's a luxury that kids don't get in school, right? Usually, I can say this as a public school teacher, you get the thing and you got to teach the thing to all the kids. And you got to make that one menu item work for all 30, 33 kids in your class. Mm-hmm. You have 2, 4, I know a couple of people with 13 kids, right? But even then, surely you're going to be able to reuse something. But even then, we are able to choose what each kid needs. It doesn't all have to cost $100 a year, guys. But there are things out there that are really helpful for some kids and that will not work for others. So I think that's really important. And thank you for setting that example. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go ahead and talk to the mom or dad who's slowly having kind of a hunch there's something off about this journey, kind of like you were saying with the soldier crawl, with possibly not wanting to ride a bike or skate. What would you say, hey, do this next?
Okay. Yeah, I would find an educational psychologist or someone who is specifically certified in being able to identify any kind of learning issues.
Mhm.
because they would be the ones to really be able to tell you, what's going on and make recommendations. That would be my recommendation.
Perfect. And there are learning marketplaces out there that you can look at. I know a few people, so I will link all this below. Hopefully, that's going to be a massive list of resources, but that's
Mhm,
what this is for, you guys. We don't want you to go out there blind or ignore it. Please don't sweep this under the rug. This is something that, again, you have the responsibility and the freedom to act to do this
mhm,
for your kids. So give them that
mhm,
gift. All
mhm.
right. For the parents whose kids seem on track, what are some of the ways that we can kind of work those muscles out, give them a new challenge? What kind of things have you seen out there? It sounds like your writing course would be really cool for some kids who are really motivated. What do you think? Is
Mhm.
that a true
Oh,
statement?
yeah.
Wow.
Well, yeah, oh, yeah. Well, if your child knows how to basically write a paragraph, right? But you want to be able to have that foundation, that firm foundation of writing that paper,
Mhm,
and then be able to build everything else off of it, then I would recommend that my type of class.
mhm,
From there, if you have a high schooler, especially if they're on their way to college, I would say, okay, it's time for a research paper, an MLA one, APA, depending upon the subject matter, but I usually recommend an MLA paper. That in itself is a challenge and it's great practice.
mhm,
Something else, I know that they did it. I don't even know if they're going to bring it back or not as a requirement, but the standardized test used to have a timed writing portion
mhm,
in for the SAT and the ACT. And I mean, they've kind of just like put everything to the wayside lately, and a lot of colleges don't even require it anymore. Some are starting to, but I would recommend practicing a timed essay
mhm,
and making sure that your child knows how to bring in details and examples of whatever they're talking about. And using some type of quotes off the top of their head or some sort of statistic about a topic that they know about, because pulling different outside resources off the top of their head into their writing, if they want to prepare for something like that, I would highly recommend.
yeah.
Because I had my older son he took that kind of test and he was able to skip freshman English in college, which was really well worth it.
A good
So,
investment. I love that you said that. And one thing that I recommend to my students, because I teach like these classes that I was mentioning with public speaking and writing those essays, they're asynchronous writing. I'm not sitting there watching them write, right? A lot of times they'll write, I'll give maybe a voice message with feedback. They'll do some edits and then we'll meet up for
mhm,
class, right? So
mhm,
all this is out there. But the one thing that I consistently hear myself saying is get them reading other things, right?
mhm,
Whether it's the country that you live in and you're only reading news from that country, open up a web page from Spain. Find an English news source in Spain, or
mhm,
get some news from London, or get the BBC open, or get some news from Australia. Any news source that you can get them into is going to
mhm,
open up their eyes to what else is going on. Especially as they get into that middle and high school, they're going to start to be curious about what's happening around them.
mhm,
And again, that's going to bring in other, hopefully, character qualities that we want them to have: empathy, compassion, curiosity about other people and what they might need or be looking for in life, right? And
mhm,
so these types of things are going to serve them in the future and in the writing as well. So I love
mhm,
that. That's really cool.
mhm,
Okay. I think we've covered a lot. Again, you guys, if
mhm.
you've stuck around this long, you are champions. Katie, is there anything else we've missed? Anything else we should point people to? I feel like we've got resources,
Yeah.
courses.
No.
Okay.
I would recommend though too at the middle school and high school level
Mhm,
to try to tie not just literature as far as reading a book and then just saying, okay, they had their literature. I would tie in as far as the writing component too. I would I would write maybe a summary of a biography of the author because that gives them an idea of the historical time period that they were writing in, their experiences, and maybe how that time period and their personal experiences are reflected in what they wrote. Then from there, write an essay about that. You know, how did their personal experience influence their writing? What was going on in history that made them write about this, and how is that reflected in the piece? So that ties in the analytical skills as well as the awareness of how what's going on around us influences literature and it influences what we read. And is it biased? Is it objective? Is it just from a personal perspective of the author? So it ties in a lot of those analytical skills, but yet you're writing a biography, you're writing an analysis, and it can be any kind of question that you come up with for the student to write about for that paper.
Absolutely. And that can start much younger. We don't need to
Mm-hmm.
give them news sources when
Mm-hmm.
they're 8 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But those second graders can look at a biography of Judith Kerr, who wrote the When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit, which is one of the few books that I feel like is palatable for little kids about World War II. But that's a beautiful way to tie in lit history. And she happened to kind of build this main character off of her own experience. So there we go. It's a wonderful, wonderful way to tie these in. And if you don't feel comfortable making up those questions or pulling those questions on your own, Teachers Pay Teachers, other websites, come talk to Katie or I. You know, we can kind of point you in the direction of where to find some of those book studies. But that's a really, really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. All right, Katie, we're wrapping up. What are you looking forward to personally, professionally, whatever you want to share in the next 6 months? It's fun to kind of look ahead and see what you're excited about.
Well, speaking of the unit studies I mentioned earlier, I am putting together unit studies based on historical time periods, and I'm going to be having writing incorporated into the unit studies as a natural part of learning that topic. And I'm also developing more courses for writing that will be tied in with a piece of literature. So
that is really exciting. Okay, I'm gonna come knocking on your door, Katie. That is like speaking to my heart. History nerd who also loves teaching writing. That's really fun. So very exciting. Well, hey, thank you so much for your time. You guys, if you have not yet, head over to Katie's site. We'll link that below. Tell her thank you for being here. And to those of you who are watching, if nobody's told you yet today, thank you. Thank you for doing what you're doing. It's really important. Happy teaching, guys. Thanks for being here, Katie.
Thank you.